Hi, good evening, and thank you for joining this webinar where we're going to be talking about the Great Cambridge Junction to Bridport Road walking and cycling route. If some of the team could just give me a thumbs up if they can hear me okay, because that would be great. Yeah, great. Okay, thanks. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover over the next sort of 30 or 40 minutes. We're going to go through a bit of housekeeping, and then I'm going to give you a short introduction to the programme. I'll then pass to my colleague Ryan, who's going to talk through the routes and a little bit more information on the project itself. And then another colleague, Mike, is going to go through the communications and engagements. I think then back to Ryan for next steps, and then we'll go on to questions. Colleagues will introduce themselves as they come on and cover their elements of the webinar. My name's Rich Deason. I'm the Journeys in Places Programme Director, and this project, along with a number of others, falls under, is part of my portfolio. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, yeah, so just to go through a few housekeeping points. You should be able to see a question and answer function to ask questions. So we will be answering questions following the presentation. And also, once we've finished the webinar, we'll be reviewing the frequently asked questions section that we've got on the project page. So do submit your questions via that function. We won't be publishing them tonight, but we will be working through a number of them so that we and answering them this evening. If you've got comments or observations that you want to make, please do publish those too. That's all helpful for the team, and we'll take those away and review those. And if you've got a series of questions, it's just helpful for us if you could submit them individually. And that way, it just makes it easier for the team to sort of look through those. We are recording the webinar, but that won't record anybody who's watching, so don't worry about that. And we'll talk a little bit about this later, but as well as submitting your comments through this live webinar, if you're watching online after this webinar has happened, because we'll be publishing this webinar on the project page, you'll be able to go to the map and add your comments and your issues via the online map up until Sunday the 19th. Okay, so hopefully that's all clear, and we'll go to the next slide, please. So just to really give you a little bit of background and context, I think, to the Journeys and Places programme. You might not have heard of us previously, or you may have heard of us under a previous name as the Healthy Streets programme. Healthy Streets approach is still very much core to what we do, but we have launched ourselves under a more local brand called Journeys and Places. So if we go to the next slide, this really just covers a few points to explain why we're here and why we're bringing forward these types of projects. I think many of us now accept that we're in a global climate emergency, and so we've got to think about sustainability when it comes to how we move around the borough. And more walking and cycling is good for us individually, but it's also good for the planet. We can help improve air quality and our own health, and by building in some daily physical activity into our everyday lives through functional transport, can really have a positive benefit for everybody. We've got to remember that we've got to think about the whole community when we're thinking about transport options. A third of the community don't even own a car, and so just having a system that's very car centric is not fair, we don't believe, and we should be enabling lots of people many more transport choices. The borough already has a significantly high number of motor miles travelled, I think 1 billion miles last year, and our roads are struggling, creaking with that amount of and that volume of traffic. And so what we've got to do is think about ways in which for some people, for some of their journeys, they can travel in alternative ways. And we've got to think about creating streets and roads that are safe everyone. So if you're choosing to walk or you're choosing to cycle, you should have the same amount of consideration of your safety as if you're choosing to drive. So those are some of the sort of reasons why we're doing the type of work that we're doing. And the type of work that we are doing is broken down into four key areas. So if we go to the next slide, the first thing that we're doing, or the first area, and the area in which this project falls within, is this idea of delivering a walking and cycling network. So the council for some years now have been incrementally building this network, a whole series of routes of different styles. Some routes on key roads have full segregation, as we call it, so separate dedicated space for people who might be cycling, and improved pedestrian crossing points along those routes. Other routes might be along quieter roads where actually there's no physical interventions, but we're just putting out signs and symbols and things to help people, guide people through a series of quiet roads, and perhaps where we come across junctions and things, making improvements there to make sure it's safe. And when we're thinking about those improvements, we're thinking about people who are walking and thinking about people who are cycling, as you can see in this picture here, which is one of our earlier projects. Okay, next slide, please. So the other area of what we do is thinking about our town centres and the general public realm, how our streets look and feel. And our major project at the moment is our Enfield Town project, and you may have been involved in the engagement that we've had for that, significant community engagement over the last couple of years. And there's a project page dedicated to the Enfield Town project, so please do take a look at that as well if you want to know more about that project. A big project about how we can really improve the look and feel of the town centre, really focusing on pedestrian safety as well as we move around that town centre. And the next slide, please, looks at neighbourhoods. So we have a whole series of different projects that we're looking at in our neighbourhood residential areas. So how can we make those smaller residential streets safer for everybody, however they're moving about? And we're looking at reducing the speed and also reducing the volume of through motor traffic in those areas, as well as initiatives like our School Streets programme. So we've delivered more than a dozen school streets now across the borough, with a lot more to come, and also things like residential cycle hangers as well. So places within neighbourhood streets where people can safely and securely keep their bicycles. Okay, next slide, please, is the final area, and this is really about informing and inspiring the community to move forward and try out or participate more in active travel. There's a whole series of different services and events that we host, such as our inclusive cycling scheme that's held at Bushell Park. We also support lots of different community groups, many of them who are organising their own walks and rides, and also services like our Doctor Bike, where you can take your bicycle along and get that repaired, small minor repairs, or just a health check free of charge. So that hopefully helps explain a little bit more about the Journeys and Places programme. We've got a website that's got more information on, and I'd encourage you to, if you just Google Journeys and Places Enfield, you'll find that website. Okay, I'll now hand across to Ryan, who I think is going to talk a little bit more about the specific project that's the topic of this webinar.
Thank you, Richard. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ryan Hicks, the project manager delivering the Great Cambridge Junction to Bridport Road walking and cycling route. I'm very excited to be delivering this new piece of infrastructure that will have a significant benefit to the community by providing you more options for active travel. This project is at a very early stage at this point, so any ideas or issues that are raised by the community can help shape our future designs. So here up on the screen is our project overview with our project objectives. The first objective of the project is to expand the active travel network and create an east-west link that would connect the Clean Air Route project with the Cycleway 1, the A10, and the Great Cambridge Roundabout cycle infrastructure. Currently, most of the cycle routes in Enfield run north to south, so this would be key in linking many of the projects together, and would also provide a direct link into central London via Cycleway 1. The second objective is to create a safer neighborhood for all road users to walk, wheel, and cycle. This would help lower barriers for those wanting or needing to have an alternative to traveling by motor vehicle, which also leads into our third objective, which is to contribute towards a long-term increase in levels of active travel, both along the route and as part of a wider borough network. So this slide shows the project limits, which are identified by the two cycle symbols, and also shows the locations of key areas within the project limits, such as the North Middlesex University Hospital, Wilbury Primary School, and Wilbury Way Open Space. As you can see, we are looking for a route that travels from the southeast corner of the Great Cambridge Junction to the rail overpass located on the eastern end of Bridport Road. To analyze our options for this, we have split the project into two segments. This split happens at the intersection of Bull Lane, as you can see here, where segment 1 is to the east of Bull Lane and segment 2 is to the west. For segment 1, we are proposing for the route to run along Bridport Road, as we want to connect to the rail overpass that's at the eastern end of the road, and it will help connect to the clean air route. Segment 2 has a few different route options to consider. Two of these options are quiet ways through the neighborhood north of Wilbury Way. Quiet ways are roadways with lower vehicle usage, and here cyclists can safely integrate with traffic. On the left of the slide is an example of a quiet way. Quiet ways are active travel routes where the traffic is generally quieter, like on lightly trafficked back street. This option will be less expensive and have less of an impact on the area, as it would require minimal changes such as adding wayfinding signs and minor upgrades to the carriageway. Another option we are considering is a segregated cycle lane running along Wilbury Way. An example of this can be seen on the right. This would separate cyclists from motor vehicles by creating a protected lane that would be reserved only for cyclists. However, this would mean the existing road would require substantial modifications. So both quiet way options start similarly by having a short path running along Wilbury Way before turning right onto Wixton Close and following along to Garmin Close. The first of the quiet way options, which is seen here, then runs north on Plowman Close, continuing through Wilbury Way Open Space, where it eventually joins Hermitage Lane, and then can move onwards towards the A10 and Great Cambridge Junction. While this route is the more direct of the two quiet way options, there may be land ownership issues at the northern end of Plowman Close, as well as needing upgrades to the path along Wilbury Way Open Space. Both quiet way options do not run next to Wilbury Primary School. However, we still would like to provide a connection to the school. So as you can see, we are considering a path that runs south on Hermitage Lane, where a crossing will be provided to allow for safe travel across Wilbury Way. This is the second quiet way option. Where the first quiet way option turned north on Plowman Close, as seen in gray, the second option makes its way through to Whitehead Close, where it can eventually meet up with Hermitage Lane. While this may require slightly more navigation than the first option, this route runs along existing public right-of-way for the entirety, resulting in a lower cost and easier implementation. The last option would be a segregated cycle path running along Wilbury Way. This would be the most direct option of the three, but would have the largest implementation cost and would require more substantial modifications to the existing roadway. During the design phase, an equalities impact assessment will be undertaken, which considers how the proposed project will have a positive or negative impact on each of these characteristics that are seen here. Mitigating actions are then considered for any negative impacts which have been found during the assessment. A typical example of this might be the consideration for footway widths. Some of the design features we are considering for this project can be seen here. The first of these are rain gardens. Potential rain garden locations could be proposed throughout the alignment to create green space and capture surface water. An example of a rain garden is shown on the left. Rain gardens collect stormwater, which then filters contaminants and reduces flooding. The rain gardens will be planted with a mix of grasses and wildflowers that are attractive to pollinators and night foraging insects. Next, we have pedestrian and cycle crossing facilities. These crossings will be constructed wherever necessary to enable a safe road crossing for the pedestrians and cyclists. Lastly is wayfinding. Wayfinding signs and markings will be installed along the route to help users navigate throughout their journey. I will now pass it over to Mikey from our communications team.
Hi everyone, I'm Mikey. I am the Communications Officer for the Journeys and Places programme, and I'm going to be talking to you, talking you through a few slides about the communication and engagement related to this project. So firstly, we have a project page that is currently live and hosted on the Let's Talk platform. There's a link to it there in the top of the slide, as you can see, or alternatively, if you don't have access to the link, then if you just Google Journeys and Places Enfield, you'll be able to click on the Let's Talk page, and that will then in turn take you through to the project page for this specific project. So currently we are in an early engagement phase of the project where we are asking residents, business owners, and other interested stakeholders to share their ideas, issues, and comments on the proposed route alignment that's being proposed currently. These are all going to be collected, or they are being collected through an online map, which I'll talk a little bit more about on the next slide, through the project page. And we encourage you to submit any issues, ideas, or comments to us by Sunday, the 19th of February, which is when the early engagement phase will conclude. So we've sent out communications to residents and businesses along the route, along the proposed route, via letter drop, informing them of the start of the early engagement phase of the project. We've also used social media activity, both on the Journeys and Places Facebook and Twitter channels, and also the Enfield Council Facebook and Twitter channels. And we're doing this webinar this evening as well. So this will, as Richard mentioned earlier, will be recorded and will be hosted on the project page for all to view. So as well as the initial early engagement phase, we're also running through some stakeholder engagement with other stakeholders such as Transport for London, the North Middlesex University Hospital, and also emergency services. And any updates and designs on the project page ahead of any further engagement, with the community later in 2023 will be shared, as well as any statutory consultations on the draft order moving forward. All of the information will be posted on the project page, and we'll also be using the same communication channels as mentioned earlier, letter drop, social media activities, and potentially a webinar in the future. Next slide, please. So this is the mapping tool that I mentioned earlier. So as you can see there in the shaded area, the purple shaded area, sorry, is the area that the different route options that Ryan was just mentioning are included in that section, and also the segment 1 along Bridport Road as well. And this mapping tool is a really useful tool for us to gather people's ideas, issues, and also comments for specific points along the route. So as you can see here, you've got green pins and also red pins. So green pins are for ideas, red pins are for issues. All you do is you go onto the project page, click on the mapping tool, which is next to the survey and questions tab, and that'll take you through to this mapping tool here, and you'll be able to drop a pin on any area of the map and submit your comments to us that way. Next slide, please. So yeah, If you've not visited the project page already, I really would encourage you to, as that's where all of the information about the project will be hosted. And that includes any proposed plans for the project, obviously the mapping tool, which we just mentioned, the frequently asked questions section as well, which Richard mentioned will be updated following the webinar, key dates for the project, any information on any up and coming engagement opportunities, events or webinars will also be hosted on the project page too. And also any consultation surveys and activities will be hosted on the project page. There's also a really handy question section. So if you have any questions that you wish to ask us, there is a questions button where you can type in your question and that will come through to us, and we'll take a look at that and get back to you. So yeah, that's basically it from me. I just want to kind of just say, yeah, go to the project page and really encourage you to submit your ideas just using comments, because as Ryan mentioned, that really does help us shape the design, any future designs for this project. So yeah, that's all from me, and I'll pass you back to Ryan now and he'll take you through the key next steps. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mikey. So here are the key next steps. They are right now we're doing the engagement, and following the engagement closing on the 19th of February, we're going to analyze the information provided, and this will help us while we finalize the feasibility designs. Any further designs and development and construction is currently subject to funding, so the dates for these activities are listed as to be confirmed. Yeah, so I'd like to thank you guys for listening to this presentation. We are very excited about all the benefits that this project could have in our community. But now I'm going to hand it back to Richard Eason to facilitate the Q&A.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Mikey. That's great. Yeah, so we're through to the Q&A section. So we just brought the map up there, so you can see the sort of general area that we've been talking about, and maybe that will help with any questions. I can see just a couple of questions at the moment, so we'll just work through those. But if you've got others as they occur to you, then put them through as quickly as you can, and then we can deal with those as well. Yeah, so the first question, Ryan, is as a sort of observation around the proximity to the hospital, and how we're considering any potential impact on North Middlesex Hospital, particularly ambulances coming and going, etc. Are you able to just talk a little bit about our approach to that?
Yeah. So we're currently working closely with the hospital. I actually met with them a few weeks ago to kind of discuss any of their concerns and any issues that they might have. Throughout the entire design process, we'll stay and working closely with them and make sure that there's no negative impacts for them. And we're also going to be working with the emergency services to ensure that they're also not negatively impacted by the project.
Okay, great, thank you. And there's a question I think we get asked a lot. I can probably take this one about who's paying. I think you mentioned there towards the end, Ryan, that we've received funding from Transport for London to enable us to do this initial look at what potential route alignment might look like, and also to engage with the community to sort of gather ideas and issues as we've talked about. So at this time, we don't have any funding beyond that, but once we've gone through this first step, we can then have a discussion with Transport for London about the potential for for future funding. So very early stages at this time. Not many other questions. I think there's something about the corner there. I think is it where Gloucester Road comes round to Bridport Road. I think that's quite a sharp bend, and I think just sort of concern about how we, people transition across to get over the railway bridge there. I don't know whether, Ryan, you've got anything you could say on that.
Yeah, yeah. For that, we've been looking at that as part of the design process. The junction's currently being reviewed, and we're looking at a couple different options on how to transition cyclists over to the rail overpass. But there will be some sort of crossing that will be protected, that will help protect cyclists and pedestrians so that they could safely do so.
Okay, great. And presumably, any ideas or issues around that, that particular location, then would be, great to hear from the community via the map, by the pins on the map. So please do fill that in or complete that. And another common question around parking. So car parking. Do we anticipate? I suspect that it will depend obviously on the designs, but is there anything you can say to that, Ryan, in terms of impact on car parking?
As of right now, we're still analyzing our options, so we're going to try to limit any impacts as much as possible. And that's one of the criteria we're looking at for the analyzing the different options. But as of now, it might be impacted minimally, but we're still looking into that.
Okay. And a sort of related question is around parking actually for the hospital. I think I can probably take this one. So I think there's some observations of how the hospital has been building sort of a new staff car park, which I believe is the case. And I think the sort of the observation is how do the two sort of marry together if the hospital are providing more provision for staff and car parking. So my understanding is that what the hospital is doing is consolidating the amount of consolidating the provision of car parking for staff. So it's containing it within a smaller footprint, through the use of a sort of multi-story thing rather than taking up more land across the site. We've also we have as a program in partnership with TfL and the hospital have previously put in an excellent secure facility for cycle parking at the hospital, along with showers and toilets. So we're providing. When you're thinking about these types of projects, we have to think about the whole solution. So having places for staff to securely lock their bikes, to store their equipment, is just as important as providing the cycle infrastructure for people to get to the hospital. So we know there are lots of staff currently who currently cycle to the hospital, and the hospital as an organisation are very committed to enabling and encouraging more of their staff to travel that way. So these routes that are linking into what is a key destination is really important. There's also a bike loan trial that we're running at the hospital as well, that we're supporting the hospital with, where the staff who haven't cycled before and haven't got a bicycle, we're supporting them on some loan trials. So lots of things going on. We recognise that not every member of staff will cycle to the hospital, and some may be coming from long distances, and understandably the hospital will continue some car parking provision for them. So let me have another look through the questions. So one question around whether I think observation that there's not the detail here of the designs yet, and we understand that that's a further stage in the project when we've gathered people's issues and ideas, and if we're able to then secure more funding to develop the designs, then we would absolutely come back to the community via the project page, likely another webinar, maybe some other events where we can talk through any specific ideas that might have emerged. So I think questions about buses, so bus routes and whether there'll be any impact on those. Brian, I don't know if you have anything to say to that. I think that the design, some bus stops and things, all of that would need to be considered depending on the level of facilities on Bridport Road in particular.
Yeah, so we'd be working with TfL to understand the bus stop locations, and as part of that, we could look at possibly shifting it one way or the other. But at this point, we're still looking at what way we're going to go down Bridport Road. So once we solidify that, then we'll know what we're going to do about the bus stops.
Yeah. Okay, great. And some of the observations that are coming through, and we've got those now. You'd feel, add those to the map as well. You don't need to, because we'll be capturing them through this chat. But it's these kind of things that it's good to, concerns that are raised at this early stage, and we can make sure that they're all thought through in the design process. Okay, I can't see any further questions. I'll just have a quick look. No, I can't see anything else. I can't see anything else. So I propose to sort of wrap up this short webinar. I hope that's been informative. But the key thing, as we keep stressing at this stage, is to get feedback, from the community, and that can inform and shape the design as we move forward. And when more funding is secured and more designs are developed, then we'll come back to the community with those. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you attending. Thanks for all your comments today on the website. And I wish you good evening. Thank you, team, Mikey and Ryan, for the webinar this evening. Okay, we'll end the webinar there. Good night.